The Buccaneers would be wise to welcome back a familiar face, that and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this Thursday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media, covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers as editor-in-chief of the 813.tv. Here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. A loaded insider mailbag, and some people ask me anything questions. That is coming up here on a bye week Thursday. But let's start with the fact that the Bucs need to welcome back a familiar face. And no, I'm not talking about John Gruden. I know many of you are aware that Gruden was at Ray J last week as a guest of the Glazers. It appears things are on their way to some sort of amends, and we're going to see Chucky back in the Ring of Honor sooner than later, but I'm not talking about him. His coaching days are over. He doesn't need to be an advisor of any sort or anything like that. I am talking about Mike Edwards. For the second time in the last few weeks, Edwards has been released by the team he was playing for. First, it was the Buffalo Bills. Then he was scooped up by the Tennessee Titans, who, according to JT Runke, who covers the Titans for Broadway Sports, has been released yet again. So Edwards played his first 4 seasons with the Bucs under Todd Bowles and was a big part of the Super Bowl team. After appearing in just 3 games for the Bills this season, he finds himself on the market again. And here's the thing about Edwards. Is he going to completely change the landscape of the Bucs defense if he returns? No. But he will help, and he will make them a little bit better. Here's why. Edwards, in Todd Bowles' system, was a ball hawk. He can help create some takeaways in the scheme where he found a ton of success, and in a defense that isn't generating a lot of takeaways. In 4 years with the Bucs, he had 7 interceptions. 3 of those were pick sixes, 1 forced fumble, 3 fumble recoveries, 2 sacks, 21 passes defensed. Outside of the Bowles system, he hasn't been anywhere close to that productive, and he's played in just 20 games in 2 years. 1 interception, 5 passes defensed, 2 fumble recoveries, 0 forced fumbles, 1 sack. He thrives under Bowles and is nothing more than a bit player in other schemes. Yes, you have Jordan Whitehead, but Antoine Winfield Jr. has not been able to play as freely as we saw him play last year. Yes, he may still be dealing with that injury, and that's part of the reason that the production compared to last year has dropped off some, but he's having to try and cover up for some of the atrocities of the pass defense, so Bowles isn't able to utilize him the same way that he did last year when he was putting up record numbers. This team has lost Jamel Dean. They've lost Bryce Hall. Tyke Smith has been in and out. They're relying on Josh Hayes and Tyreek Funderburk to play exponentially more defensive snaps than what was originally intended. If you bring in Edwards, now all of a sudden you're able to move Izien back to corner. You can run 3 safeties out there with Edwards and Whitehead worrying about the coverage, while Winfield can go back to being the defensive weapon that he is. He can line up all over. He can drop in coverage. He can blitz. He can play in the box to stop the run. His play opens up, everything on the defensive side of the ball But now, if you have Edwards, the back end is still covered, and you don't have to have Antoine trying to hide some of the defensive deficiencies. Bowles just hasn't had that luxury this season, and it shows. They are the worst pass defense in the NFL over the last 6 weeks. So while Edwards doesn't solve the problem at edge rusher, he doesn't solve the problem at inside linebacker, he doesn't solve the injuries, he is a player that has proven himself to be extremely productive and valuable in this specific defense. Things are not going to get any better by doing nothing. And Edwards is going to cost you what? A case of Gatorade and a steak dinner for the rest of the season? There's no learning curve. There's no adapting to the scheme. He's plug and play. The Buccaneers need to do something to help that secondary and to try to get out of the basement of the NFL in terms of pass defense. And at this point, what do you have to lose? You sign him for the rest of the season and at least be a little proactive in attempting to improve rather than just waiting for things to get better, waiting for guys to come back from injury who weren't playing, astronomically well to begin with. And you're sitting there on your hands waiting for things to get better on their own. That's just not going to happen. So while this defense is bad, there's no sugarcoating it anymore. Mike Edwards does help a little bit. He does provide some type of relief. And if nothing else, he provides depth to an incredibly shallow position. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But he gives you someone that has been a proven commodity on this team for this defense for the first 4 years of his career, wasn't really able to catch on with the Chiefs, obviously not able to catch on with Buffalo or Tennessee. Now you have the opportunity to bring someone in who thrived under your tutelage, thrived with these other players on the defensive side of the ball, and can do a little something to help you in the backstretch of this schedule where you're still trying to make the postseason. You're still looking to rattle off 5 or 6 wins over the next 7 weeks so that you can put yourself in the thick of the wild card hunt. Maybe with some help, you're back in the race for the NFC South. I think it just makes too much sense for the Bucs to take a good long look at Mike Edwards and what he would be able to do for this defense moving forward. It's not going to solve everything, but it'll help. And right now, the Bucs need all the help that they can get. We are diving into the mailbag. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. History, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study these things in school? Probably not. But even if you did, maybe it's time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed basic fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, and a personal favorite of mine, Mark Twain, Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, and selected short stories. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, and discussions, or just sit back and enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/locked-on to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/locked-on to register. hillsdale.edu/locked-on. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything that you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. The Buccaneers are losing more and more ground and are now plus 600 to win the NFC South and plus 13,000 to win the Super Bowl, trailing the Denver Broncos, tied with the New York Jets and the Indianapolis Colts. The Chiefs remain Super Bowl favorites at plus 430, followed by the Lions at plus 460, the Ravens at plus 600, and the Bills at plus 800. Visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listener review every day. The new Locked On NFL is here, and it's 2 shows every day. You have the madman Tyler Rowland kicking off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. Then you can swing by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. You add in the Locked On local experts. You get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. So make it your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I had a great question roll in from one of the insiders, so I decided to open it up to a mailbag episode, as well as some people doing some Ask Me Anything questions since we're on a bye, and those are always fun. I got a couple of those. If you're not an insider and you have something that you want to ask, just send a DM on Twitter to @LockedOnBucs. I'll get to more of them on tomorrow's show, but I want to start with the question that inspired the mailbag for this week, and it comes from Tom B. And he said, now that we are a little more than halfway through the season and injuries have caused us to play most of the backups at every position, where have we shown the most depth and the least depth? And Tom, that is such a great question. For the most depth, and I realize this sounds kind of odd because there really aren't too many players at the position, but to me, it's running back is where this team has the most depth. To have a 1-2 punch like Rachaad White and Bucky Irving, then you see Rachaad go down and miss time, but Sean Tucker comes in and becomes the NFC Offensive Player of the Week, was absolutely outstanding. And you all know how much I want to see Tucker be more involved in the offense. But to know that if one of your studs goes down, that you have a guy waiting in the wings that can have those kinds of games and those kinds of outings, that level of production is huge. Then you have DJ Williams, who I've been very impressed with going back to preseason and training camp. So if there's more injury problems, maybe there's a game where 2 of the main 3 running backs can't go, I would be extremely confident in Williams' ability to head out onto the field and be productive with meaningful snaps. I really like what the Bucs have at running back from top to bottom. So I would say that is the best position that the Bucs have in terms of depth. For the least depth, I'm going to say it's the secondary. You lose your top backup at outside corner in week 1, and that looms large. You've had games now without Jamel Dean, and your backups across the board keep going down, and that has led to the worst pass defense in the league, or one of the worst pass defenses in the league. Josh Hayes did play pretty well on Sunday after he made a few boneheaded mistakes early in the game, so he is starting to improve, but Funderburk is not ready for this many snaps. Tavier Thomas hasn't been anything other than a special teams contributor. Dean was average at best when he was on the field. Hopefully he comes back after the bye. You had Winfield miss time. Neither Christian Izien or Kayvon Merriweather were all that impressive in his absence. Basically, the starters as a whole are solid. They're not great, when you look at all of them. Antoine Winfield Jr., still one of the best safeties in the NFL. Zion McCollum has really come into his own as a top cornerback in the NFL. But when you take into account everyone, you add in Tyke Smith, you add in Jordan Whitehead, you add in Jamel Dean, they're solid. But once one of those players goes down, everything starts to unravel. And they've had multiple players go down throughout the season. So it's just unraveling more and more and more. Hopefully you do get Tyke Smith back after the bye week. That would certainly help. He is on a huge upwards trajectory. I'm so excited about the future of Tyke Smith for this Buccaneers team. But that's why I'm so big on the idea of bringing back Mike Edwards, because this team has no depth in the secondary, and it continues to show week in and week out when they're getting just absolutely shredded by these opposing quarterbacks. I am going to throw in a quick ask me anything question here, because I had two questions that were kind of similar. I want to talk about those after the break. But Insider Tim asks, James, I know you were really excited and talked a lot about the Foo Fighters concert you went to, and you've seen Springsteen a few times over the years. If you could only listen to one band or artist for the rest of your life, who would it be? Tim, that is so tough. It's really tough because I like so many different bands and artists in all different kinds of genres. I'm very much a binge listener, so I'll get in a certain mood and I'll listen to a certain genre or a certain artist for multiple days at a time. Last week, I was on a Michael Jackson kick. I was going through and I was listening to a lot of Michael Jackson, and it just kind of kept me upbeat while I was at work, kept me smiling, kept me bobbing my head. Of course, the Foo Fighters and Springsteen are two of my absolute favorites. I've always loved the Beatles. You can't see it, but I have the Beatles entire catalog box set up on the shelf behind me. Linkin Park, another one. I got a Funko Pop of Linkin Park up there on the shelf. They've been one of my favorites since they came out. DMX was a huge one for me when I was in high school and college. I still listen to him. Brad Paisley, Toby Keith, Eminem, Genesis, Phil Collins. Yeah, I listen to a lot of different things. Little Feat, I've seen them multiple times. But if I only got one band or artist for the rest of my life, and it was the only artist that I could listen to, and I got their full catalog that I could go through, I think I would have to go with Springsteen. And I say that because he has so much out there. His studio albums, every concert he has ever done has been recorded. You can listen to him he's got his own channel on Sirius XM, where they'll play, concerts in their entirety, going, from the 70s all the way up through last week. You can access a lot of his live albums through a couple of different streaming services. And I like the live stuff better than the studio stuff anyway. So even though I like the Beatles more than I like Springsteen, I think the volume of things that I could listen to and the choices that I would have with Bruce makes me lean in that direction. So yeah, I mean, great question. I do love music, and you guys see the music stuff behind me. I got a movie question. I'll talk about that tomorrow. You see all that stuff behind me, but yeah, I think I'd have to lean Bruce, but I love so many different bands and artists and different kinds of music that it's a really tough choice. But a couple of insiders want to know about a potential coaching change and the options. I'm going to talk about that next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. It's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players leaves in the first half and doesn't return. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quickly as 15 minutes. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Whether you're dodging tackles on the field or cheering from your couch, The Joint Chiropractic has your back literally. As an official chiropractor of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're here to make sure you're always in the game, no matter your role. If you're feeling the pain after a long week or just looking to stay active, they offer personalized care to help you bounce back stronger. 90% of elite athletes, including NFL pros, rely on chiropractic care to stay at the top of their game and perform their best. At The Joint, you don't need an appointment. Just walk in and get the care you need same day. No scheduling hassles. Just walk in whenever it's convenient for you. Here's the real kicker. As a Bucs fan, you're going to get your first visit for just $19. Head over to Buccaneers.com. Check out the contests and promotion section underneath the fans tab and download the offer. A great deal for great fans. Head to thejoint.com to find your nearest Tampa area location. Wrapping things up here on a Thursday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. And I apologize for my voice. I cannot breathe through my nose right now. I basically lost my voice last night. Dealing with a cold. It happens to all of us. 'Tis the season, right? But there's obviously been talk about Bowles being on the hot seat, and the general consensus is that Liam Coen should take over as head coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2025 and beyond. I had insiders Scotty J and Mike both write in about this, and Scotty J says, everyone is talking about Coen taking over. In my opinion, this would be a mistake. I would look at the Broncos, Vikings, or Chargers defensive coordinators. Do you agree? Coen is a first-year offensive coordinator. Give the man a raise, but head coach is too much. Canales effect. I can't support Todd any longer. There's too much tape. Then Mike says, if we get rid of Todd and promote Liam, any idea who we might be looking at for defensive coordinator? So I feel like I can cover both of these together. And Scotty mentioned defensive coordinators for the Broncos. That's Vance Joseph. Vikings is Brian Flores. And the Chargers is Jesse Minter. Here's the thing about that approach and why I disagree with your assessment on this, Scotty. If you don't promote Coen as your head coach, you're going to lose him. That's really what it's going to boil down to. It's not totally fair to compare him to Dave Canales as far as Canales' first year head coaching job. That was a terrible job to take. He's working for the worst owner in sports. He had a bad roster with a bad quarterback. He was not going to fix anything in year one. He may be gone before they're able to fix anything at all because David Tepper is the worst owner in sports. That's why I said on this show that Canales should not take that job, but he did, and I understand it. You lost Canales after one season, and Coen is blowing that offense out of the water. He is going to be highly sought after, and he will be a head coach for someone. And I know, like Canales, he's a first-year play caller, and it may be too soon to make that jump, but someone is going to take that risk, and it should be the Bucs. And so I'm going to answer your question with a question of my own. Who would you rather keep in the building? The guy in charge of a top 5 offense or the guy in charge of a bottom 4 defense? That's the decision that Jason Light is looking at. You can reference Dirk Cutter and how the Bucs promoted him for the development of Jameis and all of that. You referenced Dave Canales and his struggles in Carolina, but every situation is different. There's the outside chance that Coen doesn't take a head coaching job and he stays with Baker and the Bucs, but those chances are extremely slim. Coen bounced to 3 different spots in 4 years, never staying in one place more than a year. Loyalty is not a big thing, and that's not exclusive to Coen. Loyalty is something for fans, for the players, for the coaches, for the front office, etc. It's about what's best for them, their career, and their family. They don't buy into these rivalries. They don't buy into being a traitor. They make a business decision for themselves. And I brought that up on the show numerous times. If you're working for Apple, okay, let's throw that out there. Let's say you work for Apple and you're in research and development, and someone from Samsung calls you and says, hey, we love what you've been doing with Apple. We want to make you the head of research and development for us. And we're going to give you a 25% raise over what you're making right now. You're taking that job. You're not going to stay loyal to Apple when you're offered a better opportunity for yourself and your family for another company. It's the exact same thing for these guys. It really is. And I know as fans, you get wrapped up in the, Bucks shouldn't play for Saints and Yankees shouldn't play for Red Sox and Lakers shouldn't play for Celtics and all that nonsense. It's nonsense to them. It really truly is, because this is their job. This is their career, and they view it from a very different lens. So if Coen gets a head coaching offer, he's gone. There are 32 of those jobs, and you don't balk at your chance to get one. Take a look at Byron Leftwich in 2022. He backed out of the Jacksonville job. His offense for the Bucs without Bruce babysitting him was a disaster. He's out of the league. So while I get the idea behind hiring one of those defensive-minded guys as a head coach and keeping Coen at offensive coordinator, it's just really not something that they would be able to do. If the Bucs move on from Bowles, even if Bowles stays and Coen isn't promoted, he's going to get a chance to be a head coach for someone else, and he's going to take that opportunity. That's just the reality of the situation. As far as who his defensive coordinator options would be if Coen is promoted to head coach, I'm really not sure. That's something that's going to take a lot of time to sift through. It's likely going to be someone that he's worked with in the past. That's how these coaching staffs tend to materialize. So you have somebody like Brandon Staley, who was the defensive coordinator for the Rams when Coen was there. He's now the assistant head coach in San Fran. Wasn't great at the head coaching, but he's a solid fit for the Bucs and the personnel that they currently have in being a defensive coordinator. Lance Schulters is kind of the same thing. He was a defensive assistant for the Falcons, then for the Rams for a couple of years while Coen was there. Now he's part of Raheem Morris's staff in Atlanta. Chris Shula worked with Coen. He's currently the DC with the Rams. Not sure he would make a lateral move or if the Rams would even allow him to interview for a lateral move. So you just kind of go through to see who Coen may have a connection with, who he might trust to come in and take over the job, who was successful as a coach on the defensive side of the ball at different stops where Coen has been. And then that's sort of where you start, and then you see where things go from there. For that matter, he could just promote someone that he's currently working with. Larry Foote, Casey Rogers, Nick Rapone. Those are guys that may get an opportunity to be a full-fledged defensive coordinator with the Bucs. Obviously, the players are already familiar with them. It would be a pretty seamless transition. So there will be a lot of options. It'll just be a matter of what well Coen wants to dip into to start that search and narrow down what kind of style he wants, what kind of personality he wants leading the defensive side of the ball. But that is going to do it for this episode of Locked On Bucs. Again, if you have a mailbag question and you're not an insider, go ahead and send me a DM on X, on Twitter, whatever you want to call it, over at Locked On Bucs. It can be about the Bucs. It can be about a player. You can send in your Ask Me Anything because it's a bye week. Let's have a little bit of fun. We're going into a Friday. Let's go into the weekend, having a great time. Send in any and all questions that you want. I'll get to more of those on tomorrow's show. In the meantime, check out everything that's going on over at the 813.tv. Follow on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @Yarcho_Bucs. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. And of course, make sure you're subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.